to solve this problem of electronic states in molecules, basically, right? And by decoupling the Hamiltonian into the nuclear part and the electronic part, etc., I argued that the electronic states form, one set of problem for which we need to solve the Hamiltonian of the electronic coordinates. Number one, the electronic coordinates problem, the Hamiltonian, electronic Hamiltonian, does explicitly involve the R of the internuclear separation. Right? So that's number one. Then the internuclear separation, so there's a separate differential equation for that. That involves the vibrational states, and the angular part of that problem involves the rotational states, basically. Okay. So the electronic states already have some information about the nuclear part, 1 by R, in the Hamiltonian, and the electronic state, whatever is the eigenenergies, that feeds into the vibrational states by means of the potential, effective potential, etc. Okay, and whatever I'll get as a vibrational states, that will feed into the rotational problem also, etc. Okay. Okay, so that's what we have been doing, and we started from the simple most problem of single electron molecule, basically. A prototypical example is H2 plus ion. So we solved explicitly for the linear combination of atomic orbital approximated energy for that H2 plus ion in the last class, etc. Okay, so this is called the LCA approximation, and today we are going to use this as a building block for calculating the energy levels of molecules which have larger number of electrons, basically. Okay, and this is very similar to the hydrogen atom problem. So the hydrogen atom single electron atom wave functions used as a building blocks for two or more electron atoms, basically, right? So likewise, we will see that this can be used as building blocks for other atomic these things, etc. Okay. So today let's start with the molecular hydrogen, and then molecular hydrogen will already give us a lot of ideas, and we will just generalize it to study in general the low laying, let's say, molecular states. So low laying, I mean smaller z, etc. Okay, so let's proceed with that. So in the hydrogen atom case, we had one electron molecular orbitals, and those we used to construct the multi-electron atomic wave functions, etc. Likewise, so here we will have one electron molecular orbital, H2 plus orbitals, etc. that we saw, right? So sigma G, sigma U, etc. And those we will use to construct the multi-orbital molecular orbital. Okay? And this approach of treating the starting from the single electron molecular orbitals, etc., is named as Hund-Mulliken or molecular orbital method, basically. Okay. Okay. So let's start with the hydrogen molecule, H2 molecule. So now I have two nucleus, A and B, and I have two electrons, 1 and 2, basically. Okay. So here's the labeling scheme. So from the A nucleus, electron 1 can be at RA1 distance, and electron 2 will be at RA2 distance, basically. And electron 2 will be at RA2 distance, and from nucleus B, electron 1 is at RB1 distance, and electron 2 is at RB2 distance. Okay. And the distance between the electrons is labeled as R12, and the distance between the two nucleus A and B is labeled as R, capital R, basically. So we have a cis hydrogen molecule, so two electrons, E1, E2, two nucleus A and B, and this is the labeling scheme, basically. Okay. And then let's start with the H2 plus orbitals, basically, right? So in the last class, we already saw that we can because of the permutation symmetry of the nucleus, we are forced to build this symmetric and antisymmetric orbitals, which are like the Girard and the un-Girard orbitals, basically. And later we found that the Girard orbitals have lower energy, so they are called bonding orbitals. The corresponding potential is sort of bound state for the nucleus, and the un-Girard states are called anti-bonding orbitals because they do not have any bound state solution for the nuclear potential. So we'll just use these two orbitals, basically. So we know that this is the lowest energy state, and this is the first excited state, etc. So we'll just use this to construct the lowest states of H2 molecule, basically. So recall that these were the states from the H2 plus single electron molecule, Now we will use this to construct the two electron molecule, which is H2 basically. Okay. Okay. Now with multi-electron problem comes this problem of full symmetrization of the wave function, etc. Right? Because we know that these electrons are fermions, so the full wave function has to be antisymmetric. That implies that either the spin part can be antisymmetric or the space part can be antisymmetric, while the other one is symmetric and vice versa, etc. So just to recall, for the two electron system, I have two spins. So the spin wave function can be either a singlet or a triplet. And if you recall, if I label the state particles as 1, 2, and the SZ states as alpha and beta, let's say up is alpha and down is beta, then the singlet state can be written as a combination of 1 by root 2 alpha beta. So 1, 2 minus beta 1 alpha 2 basically, right? Normalized with a factor of 1 by root 2. And that state, let's label as chi 0, 0, 1, 2. So the 0, 0 is written in the context of S and SZ basically, right? So the 0, 0 is written in the context of S and SZ basically. Okay, so that was the singlet state. And the spin triplet states were, chi 1. So the total spin is 1. And the SZ or the MZ value can be 1, 0, and minus 1 basically. Okay. So these are the other three triplet states basically. So alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, beta 2. So, chi 1 minus 1, and chi 1, 0 was, alpha 1, beta 2 plus beta 1, alpha 2, normalized by a factor of 1 by root 2. Okay. So that's the basically this wave functions for the spin part, etc. And these I can combine with this where the space part of the wave function, etc. So these I can combine to construct a set of wave functions, which are given by three of them are space symmetric and three of them are space antisymmetric, etc. Okay, so 6 choices of wave functions, etc. So let's look at them basically. So the space symmetric part I can just like the triplet, two orbital triplet basically I can have as phi g, g of 1, phi g of 2 times chi 0, 0, 1, 2 basically, right? So let's call that state as A state. Then phi b is the first excited state, the Angirad state into Angirad state, etc. That's the phi b state. And then I can have a phi c state where I use a linear combination of these two to form a symmetric combination basically. So phi g1, phi u2 plus phi g2, phi u1. Sorry, so here there's a typo. So this should be 1 basically. And all of these have to be multiplied by the spin singlet or the spin antisymmetric part, which is chi 0, 0, 1, 2 basically. So these are the three space symmetric states. And likewise, you can construct, space antisymmetric state. So space antisymmetric, I can only construct one state. So the triplet is only one combination basically. So 1 by root 2 phi g1, phi u2 minus phi g2, phi u1 basically. And this has to multiply with this state chi 1 ms, where ms can take three different values for the triplets, which is 0, 1, and minus 1 basically. Okay. So these are the total combination of two states that I can construct, which are, are completely antisymmetric. So any questions till now? Okay. And just remember that phi g were the bonding states and phi u were the anti-bonding states, number 1. Okay. And then I'll leave you to show that this phi a state, for example, you can write in this notation. So sigma g. Okay. So sigma were the states which had the total angular momentum corresponding to 0, just like the S basically. All right. So the LZ value, so the total JZ value is 0 basically. Okay. So that is the sigma, and this will be symmetric. So it's called the Girard. Symmetric under inversion. I'm a homonuclear nucleus H2. H and H are identical. So I can use Girard, un-Girard states, etc. So this is Girard, and this is also positive eigenvalue under reflection. Okay, and the spin multiplicity is 1 because the spin comes from the triplet part basically. So this is the spin multiplicity of 1. Okay. So you can show this explicitly that this can be written as sigma g plus 1. And similarly, the B state also can be written as sigma g plus 1, irrespective of the fact that I start from sigma u of the HU atoms. For the composite wave function, this is a sigma g plus actually. Okay, so this you show explicitly. And then the C wave function can be written as sigma U un-Girard wave function. So this is not really symmetric when I interchange particles 1 and 2, basically, or not symmetric under inversion. So sigma U plus, and spin multiplicity is still 1. And these wave functions, basically, these three set of wave functions, where the special part is antisymmetric, can be written as capital sigma U, so the un-Girard. Okay. So minus eigenvalue under inversion, and this plus denotes plus eigenvalue under reflection, etc. With a spin multiplicity of 3. Okay, so this you need to show explicitly. But these are the four combinations for the hydrogen molecule, etc. Now I can write down the Hamiltonian, and I can one by one calculate the. So these are like guess wave functions, let's say, constructed from one electron wave functions. I can start putting them and sort of calculating these numbers, basically. Okay. Okay. And then, yeah, so just before we do any calculation, etc. So phi A was, 2 electrons are in the bonding orbital phi G with opposite spins. So that is what I would expect the ground state to be, basically, right? Because the phi G was the lowest energy state. So following the helium atom problem, just like in the helium atom, I had 1s and 1s, basically. This is likely to be so the phi A state is likely to be the ground state energy of the helium. So let me start with that, and then we'll do explicitly calculations to check that, etc. Okay. Okay. So let's proceed with that. So here, so this is the Hamiltonian, full Hamiltonian. Okay. So as Ruma likes, now there are two electronic kinetic energies, basically, because there are two electrons now. So del 2 R1, del 2 R2, and now the electronic potentials are many. So let's see. So electron 1 with nucleus 1, Ra1 by Ra1, electron 2 with nucleus A, so 1 by Ra2, electron B with, so electron 1 with nucleus B, so 1 by Rb1, electron 2 with nucleus B, 1 by Rb2, then electron-electron repulsion, which is 1 by R12 with a plus sign, and nucleus-nucleus repulsion, which is 1 by R, basically. So this is the full Hamiltonian of the system. And this I can effectively write as S01 plus S02 plus R12 plus 1 by R, where S01 or 2 is defined as their kinetic energy plus their potential energy, combining both of these nuclei, basically. Okay. And S0I or H01 and 2 basically look a bit like this H2 plus ion problem, barring the factor of 1 by R, actually, right? So remember that the H2 plus ion problem had this del 2 R1 minus 1 by RA1 minus 1 by RA2 plus 1 by R problem when written in atomic units. Okay. So this is a problem which is very close to H2 plus ion, and this we had already solved. All right. So if we take this Hamiltonian with that 1 by R, we go to energy Eg or Eu, which we explicitly calculated in the last class, times phi G for, slash phi U, basically whatever is the eigenfunction. Okay. Since there's a 1 by R missing here, so let me subtract that from the energy, basically. So Eg U minus 1 by R. Okay. So that's the eigenfunctions of H0I, which are already sort of known. Okay. Okay. So that's the starting point, etc. Now for each of these four wave functions or each of the six wave functions, but I just wrote down four explicitly, A, B, C, D. So the spin triplets are all coupled into one notation, basically D. So for any given phi x where x is A, B, C, D, I can calculate the energy by doing this calculation. So phi x, He, phi x, assuming phi x are normalized, else I have to divide by the normalization energy. Okay. And in particularly for the A wave function, we can do this calculation explicitly, and you will find that the explicit calculation shows you that this is the energy, right? So if we do, so 2 times Eg of R, of course, Eg of R I was expecting, basically, right? And then I already had a 1 factor of R. So in one, I will not subtract this 1 by R. In the other, I will subtract this 1 by R, etc. So I get 2 Eg minus 1 by R, right? And then I have an extra term compared to the H2 plus ion problem, which is this 1 by R12, basically. So that again I need to integrate dr1, dr2, 5g1, 5g2 mod square basically. Because there are 2 electrons, now the phase space is also 6-dimensional. So 3 coordinates corresponding to R1, 3 coordinates corresponding to R2. Okay. So that's why this integral is over R1 and R2 both. So that's your energy eigen value basically. Okay. And I said that I will start from this 5G, 5U, etc. But I did not specify that this 5G and 5U for even the H2 plus ions, etc. Can be calculated either exactly or within the LCU approximation or within some other approximation, etc. Okay. So if I just use the LCAO approximation, linear combination of atomic orbital approximation that we did explicitly in the class last time, then you will find that you can calculate this EA of R, and you can plot this EA of R. You get this curve which we spent quite some time in the last class, etc. And that minima turns out to be at R0, which is like the internuclear equilibrium radius, is given by 0.8 Armstrong. And the electronic dissociation energy, which was the energy of the minima from the zero line, etc. All right. So which is the energy I'll need to give to the molecule to break it. So the electronic component of that is given by 2.68 easy. Okay. So this is the calculation for the H2 molecule using LCAO method for first calculating the energy of the H plus ion, H2 plus ion, and then using that to construct this 5G and 5A as 5U states, and using those states to construct the triplet, singlet combination antisymmetric wave functions, etc. And if I calculate all 4 combinations, etc., I'll find that the A wave function, the 5G1, 5G2, the spatial part has the lowest energy, and this energy is given by this. And if I use this, then I find that this dissociation energy and R0 is given by this. Whereas the experimental values are, so R0 instead of 0.8, it's actually 0.74. And dissociation energy instead of 0.2, 0.68, it is actually 4.75 Armstrong. But it is still pretty good because it already gives me the intuitive physical picture of what is happening, etc. I can build all my understanding based on this, etc. And of course, I can do exact calculation using other methods, or even improve this method by using variational tricks and so on and so forth. Okay. So let's pause here for a minute. Questions? Okay. So if there are no questions, then let's proceed.
Hello.
Yeah. Sunit.
So how can we, directly, explicitly, minus the 1 by R term from the energy?
Why not?
Like
1 by R doesn't depend on the electronic coordinates at all.
Okay, yeah. So this is the basically then expectation value, right?
It is expectation value, yes. But 1 by R, so 5G doesn't depend on 1 by R, and 5U also doesn't depend on 1 by R.
Okay, then fine, expectation value.
Right, because remember that 5G we just constructed from linear combination of hydrogen atom wave functions, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Psi 1s R1 plus psi 1s R2 by root 2.
Yeah.
No?
Atomic orbitals.
Atomic orbital. So there was no capital R there.
Yes.
Hello, sir, but actually that should depend on R.
Yeah. So actually you are correct. So I'm doing a bit of cheating actually. So the R1 is actually R minus capital R by 2 or something like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Correct. So, but if you do explicit calculations, etc., you can show that, okay. So here I am not even doing explicit calculations, let's say. I am doing some sort of a approximate scheme where I will say, let's just subtract out this 1 by R and see what happens. So you are right, actually. So in principle, I should go in a more complicated calculation of expectation value of this 1 by R, etc., etc. Okay.
Okay.
But that expectation value, let me make an approximation. Let me just take it as 1 by R. and just proceed and see what happens. Okay. And if it doesn't work, if it doesn't give me a molecular bound state, then I'll come back and revise the calculation. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And even by doing this, we find that we get a molecular bound state.
Okay.
Okay. So this is a very good example just to demonstrate this, for example, no, even though it is, not factually accurate, etc., but it still does a good job of demonstrating that I'll get a molecular bound state. Okay. Okay. So let's proceed. So yeah, so you are correct actually. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay. So that was a good question. Okay. So let's proceed with that. Okay. Okay. So just to we are talking about molecules, etc. So just to connect this, whatever we are doing to this ionic and covalent character, etc. Because molecules, whenever we will talk about, we will talk about either ionic molecules or covalent molecules, right? So just to connect to that, let's write this wave function, etc. explicitly. So phi a was recall that phi g1, phi g2, phi 0, 0, etc. Right? And recall that phi g was 1 by root 2 psi 1s r1a, sorry, RA1 plus psi 1s RB, basically RA plus RB. So for a single electron system, now it will become RB1 and RA1 and so on. Okay. So let's write phi g1 explicitly. So psi 1s RA1 plus psi 1s RB1. So I just took this and substituted A1 for the first electron times psi 1s A2 plus psi 1s RB2. And the chi 0, 0, I just used this chi shorthand. Okay. So it's just chi 0, 0, 1, 2. Okay. Okay. Then let's multiply all of these, etc. Right. So if you multiply, you will see that you will start getting terms like psi 1s RA1 times psi 1s RA2. Okay. So 1 and 2 are the label of the electrons, and A and B are the labels of the nucleus, etc. So if you look at the first term, basically, that so this implies that the one electron is also on the nucleus A, the two electron is also on nucleus A. Okay, and then if you look at the second term, then this is a similar thing, but now both the electrons are attached to nucleus B. Okay, and other two terms, if you look at, then you get this sort of character where you have one electron attached to nucleus 1 and second electron attached to nucleus B, basically, and same for the last term. So the first two terms are different in character and the second two terms are different in character. So the first two terms, let's just name them as ionic. Okay, so the first two terms we will call phi a ion, which is 1 by root 2, 1 by 2, basically psi 1s RA1, psi 1s RA2. So this term plus the second term psi 1s RB1, psi 1s RB2, basically. Okay, and the second two terms where the electrons are attached to different nucleus, etc., we will call them covalent. Okay. And this is the characteristics of ionic and covalent atoms or molecules, etc. That in ionic atoms, etc., I have electronic charge transfer, and both the electrons are basically predominantly attached to one ion, while the other ion is sort of devoid of one electron. Okay, that's the ionic bonding. And the covalent molecule is such that we are talking to each other, but we are still sort of separate. Okay. So I have my own electron system. I have my own electron system, but when the electrons are in between, then the total energy is negative. So overall the system is happy. So that's the covalent bonding. Okay. And ionic bonding is like more dominant relationship. So you had one electron, I had one electron, but I have larger electron affinity. So I'll take your electron, and by that way I'll take care of your electron, and you still be attached to me. A bit like that. Okay. Okay. So in the covalent orbital, one electron is associated with each ion. So that's the important part, basically. And then if I take the extreme limit that I separate out these two ions, etc., then the breakup limit is almost like 2H hydrogen atoms with in the 1s state, basically. Okay. And these kind of wave functions promote what is called covalent bonding. And the ionic bonding is basically, both electrons are attached to one nucleus, etc. So for the H2 atom problem also, the breakup limit is like, if I just separate out, then I'll get one proton and one H2 minus molecule, basically. Okay. So that's the breakup point for the ionic part of the wave function. And these are all in phi A, basically. So I've not done anything. I've just rewritten phi A just to highlight that it can have ionic character and it can have a covalent character, etc. Okay. This kind of a wave functions, this part of the wave function is associated with what is called ionic bonding, basically. So covalent bonding and ionic bond. Covalent, both the electrons are equally shared. No, one electron there, one electron. So equipartition of resources. Ionic, I'll take your resources also and still love you, etc. So that is ionic bonding. Now, just give me a minute. Somebody at the door. मैं अभी क्लास में बंद करता हूँ। Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. So let's proceed. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So here, just before completing this, I argued that if you use LCA approximation, etc., whatever we used in the last class, etc., then R0 and DE are given by this kind of values, etc. Right? So then let me, you would also ask that, how can I improve this wave function or improve the calculation, etc. Right? So one improvement you can do is, you can start with phi A orbital, and then you say that phi A is not the complete orbital. I will have some character from other orbital also, phi B also, etc. And you build a trial wave function like phi A plus lambda phi B. Okay, and I choose phi B based on the fact that this was also sigma G plus, and on the left side I had a spin multiplicity of one wave function. So I just use the sigma G one wave functions to construct this, etc. Okay. So in principle, you can try other combinations also and do a lot of calculations and then figure out what is the lowest energy. Okay. So you can use these trial wave functions and now do the same calculation with lambda being a variational parameter, right? So you'll calculate E lambda by taking this trial wave function, sandwiching the electronic part of the Hamiltonian between it, etc., and then calculating the overlap. So I'll get some energy. Then I'll calculate dE by d lambda and I'll set it to 0, basically. And that will give me some optimal value of lambda. I'll use that. And for that value of lambda, I'll get this ER plot, right? So remember ER plot. And from those ER plot, etc., I can again calculate R0 and dE, actually. Okay. So here R0 is written in atomic units. So atomic unit, recall, was this Bohr radius, etc. So 0.5. So 1.4 into 0.5. So that is a bit close to 0.8 actually. So 0.7. So 0.8 actually. Okay. So 0.8 actually, and dE as 4 electron volt. So this is a considerably improved result. Because the exact result was a bit like this, 0.74 and DE was 4.75, etc. And we will be getting like, let's say 5 into 0.4, so 0.71 roughly as R0 and 4 EV as the dissociation energy. So this is already complete, considerably improved result coming from variational principle. Okay. And another advantage of this, using this variational principle or this kind of a wave function, is that this effectively can be written in terms of, so whatever I defined as ionic and the covalent part, etc., this can be written as 1 minus lambda times the covalent part plus 1 plus lambda times the ionic part actually. Okay. So this is an exercise. You start with these wave functions phi A and phi B. You know their physical forms in terms of phi G and phi U, whose physical forms you know. Okay, so I multiply them, etc. Phi G, phi U, and then this wave function, trial wave function, show me that you can write in this particular form. So that's an exercise for you. Okay? But if you look at this wave function, then you can see that this lambda, choice of lambda determines how much stronger is the covalent part or how much stronger is the ionic part. So that gives me one handle of sort of trying to explore where the covalent part will dominate and where the ionic part will dominate. Okay. So suppose I take what is the weight of the ionic part in this wave function divided by what is the weight of the covalent part and define that parameter as q. Then in this wave function, of course, q has to be 1 plus lambda, which is the ionic part, divided by 1 minus lambda, which is the this part, etc. Okay. So of course, I can now do this calculation as a function of lambda, right? And for each lambda, I get a optimal R0, etc. Because for each lambda, I'll get this energy curve, etc. And I'll get an optimal value of R0, etc. Okay. Okay. So then I invert the game. I said, suppose R0 was given to me, and I had calculated Q, etc. Without getting rid of the lambda, which was a variational parameter, etc. So I'm trying to see as a function of R, where will the ionic part dominate and where will the covalent part dominate. Then if you plot this Q as a function of R, you will see this kind of a curve that initially you start from something in terms of the atomic radius. Let's say you start from something which is below 1, and then you peak at around somewhere around 1.5 A0, and then you sort of decrease basically. And remember that the larger is Q, so Q was ionic part divided by covalent part, etc. So Q roughly denotes where is the ionic part dominant, etc. Right. So as R is smaller, for smaller radius molecules, the ionic part will dominate, etc. And then R crosses, beyond some sort of a threshold value of 1.5 A0. So all of this calculation is for a diatomic molecule like H2. R crosses this threshold, etc. Then I start getting this covalent bonding nature, which will start to sort of dominate, etc. And R going to infinity, the covalent molecule has to dominate because the covalent molecule is actually coming from H atom, and they sort of combine to form this molecule, etc. So non-interacting H atoms forming H2 ions, etc. as they come closer, right? So in the R going to limit infinity limit, the covalent molecule has to dominate. And this would be consistent with whatever you have read in textbooks or in class 10th, etc. That ionic bonds are shorter in length, covalent bonds are larger in length. Ionic bonds are sort of stronger in terms of the dissociation energy being larger, and covalent bonds are a bit weak in sense of dissociation energy being a bit smaller, etc. Okay. And that also you can show in terms of this basically. Okay, so this is a very nice exercise to show this, etc. Because I wrote this original wave function in terms of lambda, right? But instead of writing in terms of lambda, I can invert this and write it in terms of Q, basically, right? And Q I know is ionic part divided by the covalent part ratio. So depending on the variation of Q, you can already see that how the dissociation energy will go. So I have not shown that explicitly here, but this is an exercise you can do, etc. So instead of this plot, you can plot a function of dissociation energy versus Q, for example, or dissociation energy versus R, etc. And then you will say the same thing basically, that ionic bonds are stronger, have shorter bond length, and covalent bonds are larger, and they have covalent bonds are sort of relatively weaker than ionic bonds. They are still negative in energy, so bound state with a relatively larger bond length. Okay, so that's the important part, etc. Okay, so this brings me to the close of this first part of this argument, which is I use the molecular orbitals, so molecular orbital combinations to build the ground state energy, and this is roughly how you will sort of do it. And doing this, you can associate ionic part, covalent part, etc., and think in terms of those basically. Okay. So that brings me to the first part of this today's lecture. Let's say questions. Okay. If there are no questions, then let's proceed further. Okay. So there's another method. So this is starting point where I started from the H2 plus ions basically to construct the wave functions, etc. Right. So there's another approach which was given by this Hitler-London, or what is called the valence band method. Okay. And this starts from the wave functions of separated atoms. So if I take H2 molecule and I actually dissociate it completely by taking it apart, then I'll be left with a, uh, hydrogen atom, one s state, etc. Right? And then the idea is, let's use these disconnected states to build the atomic wave function. Okay. So use this covalent part of the wave function. Phi covalent, for example, A, you want to construct singlet, right? Then let the, so I know from experience that, the spatially singlet part of the, so the spatial part is antisymmetric in wave function that minimizes the electron-electron repulsion energy, right? So if I use that inside, then let me construct a spatially antisymmetric part from here, which is just this, right? So I am using 1s orbital. I want to construct a product wave functions and antisymmetrize it. So that's the spatial part. Half of psi 1s R1a, psi 1s RB2 minus psi 1s RA2, psi 1s RB1. So I construct that wave function. The spin part has to be a triplet. It can be in either of these states. It will not matter for the electronic part, let's say, until I include spin-spin interaction or spin-orbit interaction and so on. Okay. So that's number one, etc. Okay. So using this, you can. So this is a sort of a covalent wave function, etc. Okay. So you can use this wave function. Okay. That is number one. Or you can use just the covalent part of A, basically. So we had a covalent part of A, etc. Okay. Which was here, basically. So, or I can start with this wave function, basically. Okay. And then try to construct. So this wave function, the covalent part of A is basically antisymmetric in space and symmetric in the spin state, etc. Okay. So these are the two covalent wave functions I can construct, and they are constructed with keeping in mind that if I separate the atoms, etc., then I should get this dissociated atoms, etc. Right? And from this dissociated atoms, I can construct two wave functions. I can construct either the space part is symmetric or the space part is antisymmetric, etc. Right? And accordingly, I get this Girard state or un-Girard state, basically. Okay? And these guys I will call as phi whatever covalent G and phi covalent un-Girard, let's say. Okay. For these two Girard and un-Girard states, etc., you can calculate the energy and you will find. So if I just put in the Hamiltonian, etc., then you can effectively write it like this. So 2 times E1s plus these integrals that I'll get J and K, etc., divided by 1 plus minus I square. I will be the overlap integral, and plus minus K by 1 plus minus I square plus 1 by R, etc. Okay. And that's interesting because this way of doing calculation also allows you to see some more, physically insightful things. So I here, so plus will be for the Girard states and minus will be for the un-Girard states, etc. So without writing explicitly, basically, so if you calculate the overlap integral, which is just, phi A R1 times phi A of R2, etc. Then that will involve terms like this, which is, integral over dr1 psi 1s ra1 times psi 1s r b1. So the one electron either localized here or localized on that nucleus, they are overlapped, basically. And this is equal to, if I label that electron as 2, then nothing changes. So the overlap integral has to be identical. Okay. So that is number one. Then I get one term, which is the Coulomb interaction, etc. So the same wave functions combine, basically, right? So give me psi 1s Ra1 density times psi 1s B2 density times this expectation value of R12 minus 1 by Ra2 minus 1 by RB1. Yeah. Okay. So that if I calculate, then this is a sort of what is called the Coulomb integral, etc., coming from density-density interactions. Okay. Okay. But quantum mechanics, if I have a linear combination of atomic orbitals, then I may not get only products which form sort of the density, etc. Right. So instead of mod square, I can also get product of 4 wave functions, etc. So those kind of integrals are called the exchange integrals, etc. And K, for example, is an integral of that kind, exchange integral. and these are sort of extremely hard to calculate in general. So one of the biggest problems in condensed matter generally is to calculate these exchange integrals or to figure out the exchange correlation energy in different approximations and so on. Okay. So this integral is given by dr1, dr2, psi1s, a1, psi1s, rb2 times the same kernel 1 by r12 minus 1 by ra2 minus 1 by rb1 times, so two wave functions here, two wave functions more basically, right? Because I'll have effectively a product of two wave functions, but each wave function again is a product of two wave functions because I've constructed a multi-particle wave function, so four wave functions basically. Okay. So that's the exchange integral, and this turns out to be less than 0, etc. And their magnitudes are such that this k being less than 0 sort of dominates, etc. And for the Girard state, which is the plus, I get the lowest energy. So you're doing this calculation explicitly, writing down everything, solving, you'll find that this sigma g plus 1 state is lower in energy than the sigma u plus state basically, which corresponded to the phi d covalent state. Okay. So I can start with a phi a covalent state or the phi d covalent state, etc. And we will find that the phi a covalent state is lower in energy basically. So that's the idea. Okay. And for this phi a covalent state, you will find that R0 is 0.87 and DE is 3.14, etc. So these are already slight improvement over the LCAO approximation results basically. Okay. So this is called the Landau-Hitler method. Let me start from the covalent state already. And using the covalent state, let me calculate this physical quant phase, etc. And let's see how they go. That's the idea. Okay. So any questions on this? Okay. So if there are no questions, then let's proceed. Okay. So now a summary. So in general, you will find that this molecular orbital method, which came from LCAO kind of a method, etc., which includes this phi ionic contribution, etc. They work better, or at least as good as the valence band. Valence bond is basically dissociated ion and then coming together, etc. Valence bond methods for most of the molecules other than H2. Okay? So only for hydrogen, the valence band method is sort of comparable to the molecular orbital method. This is because there are only two electrons, etc., or only two nuclear charges, and they are comparable to the electron-electron interaction energies and so on. As soon as my nuclear charges become stronger, it sort of starts favoring ionic bonds more and more. And then when you include the contribution of the ionic bonds, you get better approximations. So that's the main idea. Okay. But for the hydrogen atom, the nuclear charge is still small and ionic bonds are not favored. And because of that, I still get this to valence band methods gives me comparable results to the molecular orbital method, basically. So that's the sort of a summary. Okay. So these are the crudest approximations that I will teach in a class, etc. But if you want to improve upon them, then there are other approximations. So you can start from Hartree-Fock theory. You have single electron orbitals. Single electron orbitals focused on A nucleus, single electron orbitals focused on B nucleus, etc. So you can use this to start constructing. So you can use this to start constructing the Slater determinant wave functions, etc. And these Slater determinant wave functions can be used in a Hartree-Fock theory sense, then to get the ground state energies, etc. So it works pretty well. And then just like atomic systems, you have this configuration integration method, etc., which uses linear combination of Slater determinants, etc. Because the Slater determinant does not really, have all the symmetries, etc., etc. So I can construct linear combination of Slater determinants to be consistent with the symmetry of the problem, LZ eigenvalues, etc. And these basically are known. So these are sort of state-of-the-art methods, etc. They can account for up to 90% of the correlation energy, and they work really, really well for molecules. So in chemistry, people will use this approximation, configuration integration approximation, quite a lot. State-of-the-art packages to determine the atomic energy levels, etc. Will use this configuration integration interaction methods. Okay. Then in condensed matter, there's another method called density functional theory based methods, which relies on these theorems by Kohn and Sham, etc., which says that this. So anything I write in terms of the densities, etc., I can make it a functional of energy and vice versa, basically. Okay. And then using this, so this is like a mean field approximation, etc. Using this, I can sort of self-consistently determine what is the most effective potential coming out of this 1 by R, 1 by R AB, 1 by R 1, 2 kind of a terms, etc. And what is the exchange contribution to that? What is the Hartree contribution to that, etc. And use those approximations to calculate the self-consistent charge density and all. Okay. So this is also a very active method which is under active research. So in our department, at least I know Manoj works quite a bit on this kind of a methods for determining the accurate potentials, or what are called, in DFT language, pseudo potentials for atomic systems, etc., which gives you nice ground state energies and nice qualitative results, basically. Okay. So this is where I'll stop for today's lecture. But let's summarize a few things. Some nice slides, basically. Okay. So this is okay. So just a minute. So smaller. Okay. Yeah. So here's a slide which shows you, for the hydrogen atom problem, basically different approximations. Okay. So the first one, dashed line black, is the linear combination of atomic orbitals or the molecular orbital picture, basically. So you see that, for low R, I get the correct sort of, trend. I get a minima also, but it actually crosses, goes to positive energy, etc. Okay. So that is sort of unphysical, etc. Because if I actually take the molecule to infinity, I should not be having a positive kinetic energy. I should just be having two molecules which stay at plus minus infinity with zero energy, etc. Right? So that's the shortcoming of this LCO method, and the reason is that I have a single proton, basically. So, in LCO method, I have the ionic contribution and the covalent band contribution. So if I have the ionic contribution, then I have some contribution where I take the molecule apart, go to large infinite distances. Then I have a single proton and a H2 plus ion. And their energy is much, much larger than the ground state energy of two hydrogen atoms in 1s state, basically. Right? So the zero line is like two hydrogen atoms in the 1s state. Okay. So that's the shortcoming. Ionic contributions are sort of inbuilt in here, etc. Okay, just coming from linear combination of atomic orbitals. Okay, and then I have this Hitler-London theory, the solid black line. Okay, so which gives you correct results approximately. It just doesn't go, for very short. Since I'm starting from a covalent band, etc. I do not have any ionic contributions built into it to start with. And as the R goes to smaller and smaller radius, this method will give me problem there. And here I do not get this positive energies at this end. Okay. But it otherwise captures, below zero energy, it captures all the features reasonably well. Okay. And then you can improve the Hitler-London method by using this variational kind of a calculation. Okay. So the dotted line shows you this improved Hitler-London method, which actually improves it by adding some ionic contribution, etc. And this is the dotted line. And the exact, of course, you can do by doing, numerical calculation exactly, Hartree-Fock, little determinant, configuration integrals, etc. And that is basically this. So this is basically the big picture of whatever we did in today's lecture. Okay. And the main point is that, even if you do crude approximations, even if I had just done this LCAO, etc., I would have still got the stability basin of the molecule. I would have realized the physics of the molecule qualitatively, that I'll get a molecule, I'll get a bound state, I'll get a dissociation energy, I'll get this R naught, equilibrium distance, etc. And that still is fantastic. Okay. And then, of course, once I have that understanding, I can keep going and improve my approximations and so on. Okay. Okay, so that was one slide. Let's go to another one, etc. So we just did, hydrogen atom and H2 plus ion, right? But now let's go back and let's look at the electronic configuration of a lot of other ions basically. Okay. So the H2 molecule already, the starting point is 1s state of the hydrogen atoms. 1s states combine to form the sigma G. So I'm talking about 1 electron states. So small sigma and G for Girard. So plus eigenvalue under inversion, etc. So that is a single electron state. The other electron is also the same state. So 1s sigma G whole square. And the combined state in our notation that we discussed, that there are 2 electrons, they can combine into spin 0, spin 1, etc. So capital sigma is total Sz is 0 state basically. Girard, because I have a homonuclear molecule H2, so I have inversion symmetry. So Girard and Girard I can classify, and then plus minus I'll have for any diatomic molecule. So it's a plus eigenstate for the reflection operator. So plus, and the spin multiplicity is 1. That means it's in a spin singlet state basically. Okay. So that's the H2 molecule. That's the Re in nanometers. So in Armstrong it is 7.4. Sorry. So 0.74 Armstrong. And the bound state is basically 4.76 in terms of eV. Then you can talk about He2 plus ions. He, molecule, Li molecule, B2 molecule, C2 molecule, and so on. So, and that's the way you will write the electronic configuration. These are the actual states of the system, and these are the Re, the mean distance of the atomic system, etc. Mean bond length you are going to measure in experiments, and this is the corresponding binding energies. Okay. So that's the electronic configuration of some homonuclear molecules. But homonuclear is just very restricted set. So let's go ahead. Heteronuclear molecules, etc. So simplest you can think of LiH, CH, HF, CO, NO, etc. And there again you start with 1 sigma states. So 1 sigma square, 2 sigma square coming from either lithium, 2 sigma square, and 1 sigma square coming from hydrogen, etc. And since it is homonuclear, I can no longer talk about Girard and Girard. So I get the sigma, the total spin is 0. So the total, so sigma, the Lz is sort of a 0. Spin multiplicity is 1. And the reflection eigenvalue is sort of a plus. Okay. And for the CH molecule, okay. So for the CH molecule, somehow the reflection operator also doesn't work, it seems. Okay. So there's no label for the plus minus states and so on. Okay. So these are some electronic configuration for heteronuclear molecules. Okay. Here's another diagram to look at the electronic configuration of, let's say, some of the states in boron molecule. So you can think of I had 1s state, 1s state. So boron is 2p molecule. Okay. So the lowest ground state was 1s, 1s. 1s, 1s came and formed 1 sigma G, 1 sigma U states basically in a triplet combination. Sorry, in a singlet combinations basically. Okay. 2s states came. So I'm talking about the ground states. So 2s states again will combine to form a triplet. Sorry, the spin singlet, etc. So that the space part is antisymmetric, and that gives me this sort of lower energy, 2 sigma G and 2 sigma U energies. And the 2p 2p states now have a lot of possibilities of combining. The 2p 2p states can combine either to form singlets or triplets, etc. The lower energy turns out to be the triplet state, which is 1 pi U. And this combination is basically called the 3 sigma G minus state. So that's how you will think about combining electronic states. Of course, this I would not have known without doing a calculation, etc. But I could have guessed what states it will form. Okay, so according to that, I can write down the splitting of these 2p levels. Okay, so that's one. Then another way of looking at all of these, etc., is this kind of a picture. Basically, let's say, so on one side I have the united atom picture, which means, so this I'm looking at boron and hydrogen molecule, etc. Right? But boron, if I add the Z of boron and Z of hydrogen, then I get the Z of carbon, basically. So if the R of both of these nucleus went to 0 and the nucleus is merged, so this charge, nuclear charge, and this nuclear charge merged, etc., then they will form a C atom, etc. Okay. For C atom, then you start with this 1s2, 2s2, 2p2 sort of configuration. Okay. You start with this configuration, which was also there in the mid-sem one of the questions, the quiz, one of the questions, etc. Then, depending on this configuration and the total angular momentum, I can have this P, D, or S states, etc. And it may look weird, but the 3P states are sort of lower in energy than the 1D state as compared to the 1S state, etc. Okay. So these states now, so these are the united atom states. And when you start separating out the molecules, etc., they will evolve in this set of states basically. So 1 sigma plus 3 pi, 1 pi, 3 sigma minus, 1 sigma plus, and 1 delta kind of states basically. Okay. So the ground state comes from a lot of combination of orbitals, etc. But basically 3p, 2p, and yeah, so this is basically coming from 1s sigma, 2s sigma, and 2p sigma states. Okay. So this is another way diagram, kind of diagrams that you will see. So united atom picture and the how the splitting happens when you go to finite distances, etc. Okay. Okay, that brings me to the last diagram of today. Let's say. So this is again a very popular way of representing this R dependence evolution of the atomic or the molecular energy states, etc. So these kind of diagrams are what is called correlation diagrams. Okay. So to the left in this correlation diagrams, to the leftmost, so the R is equal to 0, basically, I have the united atom picture. So I merge both of these nucleus, etc., and I get one composite atom, which is bigger, basically. And in the united atom, basically, I'll have this, atomic states 1s, 2s, 2p, 3s, 3p, 3d, and so on, so forth, etc. Right. And on the rightmost side, I have the completely dissociated molecular states, basically. Okay. So, for example, for a hydrogen molecule, I have the H states, basically, hydrogen atom states, basically. Okay. So that is like 1s into 2 because I have two atoms, etc. So 2 into 1s, 2s, 2p, and all of these states, etc. Right. And in between, I have the evolution of the states, etc. So as soon as I start taking the nucleus away, I start getting this, one electron levels which combine. So from 1s, I get this 1s sigma, 2s sigma, 2p sigma, 2p pi, 3s sigma, 3p pi, and this kind of states, etc. Right. And with R changing, right. So R I am taking as a parameter, there will be an optimal value, which I do not know a priori, etc. But if I just treat it as a parameter, then these levels either go up in energy or they can go down in energy, etc. etc. Okay. And the ground state, of course, is determined by some optimal energy. So, for example, for H2, this is the equilibrium distance, etc. So H2 ground state will be determined as at this R, what are the orientation of these different energy levels, etc. Okay. Okay. And the blue lines denote the bonding orbitals. The black lines denote the anti-bonding orbitals, etc., etc. So this is a hydrogen, this is a lithium, nitrogen, P2. These are the equilibrium distances, etc. As Z increases, your molecular bond length sort of keeps increasing, etc. And you go from here towards this sort of end, almost basically. Okay. So these are the sort of atomic states which combine into bonding, anti-bonding orbitals. Okay. And then their evolution with R determines the final sort of filling. How do I fill the molecular energy levels, etc. Okay. And here we should keep in mind one particular rule when we read this diagram, basically. This is called the non-crossing rule, came from von Neumann and Wigner, etc. Which roughly is based on first order perturbation theory, etc. So if you have two energy levels E1, E2, and you add some perturbation H1, 2, etc., then we can solve for the energy levels, and you find that you get this energy level which is given by E1 plus E2 plus minus whatever E1 minus E2 whole square plus this mod H12 whole square, etc. So as long as I have this finite H12, etc., I get a no, T1 will sort of be lowered in energy, and so the ground state will be raised in energy, and this thing will be lowered in energy, but they will sort of never cross each other, etc. So that's the idea. Okay, and these guys showed that if there are two states, E1 and E2 belong to the symmetry states, etc., which have the same symmetry eigenvalue. So, for example, for the reflection operator plus parity and the plus, for the inversion operator plus parity, and so two Girard states cannot cross each other, for example, right? Or two plus reflection eigenvalue states cannot cross each other, etc. Okay. So if they have the same symmetry eigenvalues, then two states cannot cross each other. So that's the main statement about this non-crossing rule that you need to keep in mind. Condensed matter, currently there are a lot of other materials like Weil-Sein metal, Dirac-Sein metals, etc., where you see these band crossings, etc. And invariably this band crossing happens because the band is dominated by the orbitals. This band is dominated by the orbitals which have different symmetry properties, different symmetry eigenvalues, actually. Okay. So these are called symmetry protected band crossings in that sense. Here we have the opposite. So we are arguing that two bands will not cross each other unless we have as long as they have the same symmetry. Okay. So this protects the ordering of the energy levels in some sense, but not always, because Girard and the un-Girard states will can in principle cross each other. Okay. So that's all I have for today. I'll stop here. If you have any questions, let's go.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, Roma, go ahead.
Sir, I think previous page.
Yeah.
Sir, in configuration level, I think there is written K. I think so. I don't get point why K is written there.
Sorry.
K in configuration level chart. I think.
Configuration level chart.
Yes, sir.
This one. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes. So why K is written? I think in configuration level.
Okay, so this key I also
yes,
don't recall, but okay, I'll look up and let you know. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So this one I'll also have to look up. Okay. Yeah, here also I have case basically. I'll look up and let you know.
Yes, sir. Okay. Sir, I think previous page. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, going. Just a minute. Yeah. Yeah, बताइए. Where?
No, sir. Below.
Okay.
Sir, I think you have written trial wave function somewhere.
Yeah, trial wave function came after this LCO, etc. After this here. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, here you have written trial wave function is a combination of phi A and phi B. So, but why you have not written phi C?
That's an excellent question, actually. Okay. So what I did was I did all the calculations by taking phi C also, phi D also, everything actually.
Okay.
Okay. And I already know this will give me the right answer. So this is what I teach in class. You're right. So ideally, I will have to take all the combinations, etc., and do the calculations explicitly.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So I have just chosen the one which I already know will give me the right answer. So somebody has already done the hard work.
Oh.
And from that, I